Hi, Nixie! What do you mean the legend? You are the legend! What the heck? Wow. Wow, it's been so long. Here's my face. Here's my sister's cat. How have you been? Yeah, oh my gosh. I feel like we are meeting each other in another dimension, in a new age, in a new era. Yeah, she's very cute right now. She's being a very good girl. She her nickname in our house is the demon because she's actually a very, very naughty cat. when she's lying down, she's very cute. Right, Looney? Her name's Luna. Oof, my throat. I have my coconut water here. But oh my gosh, and wrist. What the heck is that? I was reading that, or it's like, I every time I read those, I'm like, is this all true? I would have to look it up to verify. Oh, I laughed at the chapter 2. 2 crush sticks. Wow, indeed. Wow, indeed. How is everyone? Is everyone having a good Tuesday? Let's see. I'm not sure if the music is too loud. So I started reading a book last time, chapter 1. That's why today is chapter 2. And I try to make it professional and put the chapter 1 summary right here. It took me a while to get everything functioning correctly. Because I'm very not savvy with streaming stuff right now. But yeah, hopefully the audio's good, the video's good, cat's good, you guys are good. Oh, Kevin! Thanks for the follow. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna take one more sip of this so I don't die. Wow, you come. I'm actually very surprised. Okay. Oh my gosh. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. It's all amazing. Thank you. Thank you. I think the most amazing thing so far today is that paragraph. That intro. I need to like steal that and put that somewhere. Or I should have you write all my a little blurb for each of my streams. How about for chapter 3? Gina says I'm abusing her cat. Whoa! I'm giving her the princess treatment, Kay. This is a nice, fluffy, new, freshly laundered blanket. I loaded her up with treats so that she would be sleepy, nice and sedated for stream. We'll see. I think I gave her like 5 treats. I'm not sure how long that'll like fill the bar of calmness. We shall see. A good thing I have the stream up timer. Gonna be in and out of work. Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. It was so nice to see you too. Yeah, readingly, yes. Hopefully it'll be very readingly. All right, so I don't feel like reading that summary, but in case anyone's curious, you can read that summary that I took from, it was like bookly.com or something. If you want to catch up to where we are. And let me know if the ambience and the music can be louder or quieter, but it looks like it's fine. Should be okay. All right, chapter 2. Apert. Which is, like, what is that? It's like the event. I'm not sure how often this event happens. Apert from Aperture is the 10-day period during which the gates of Amath are opened. Okay, oh, so it's the days of the opening. Oh my gosh. All right. Perfect levels? All right. Yes, blanket envelope. I turned up my mic volume a lot so that because last time I think I was trying to read too loudly and it almost killed my voice. So today I'm gonna try reading quieter, so then hopefully it'll be more sustainable. And I also have my coconut water with me. Oh, Gina, hey, sis. Thanks for gifting a sub. Was that I guess, I don't think I've ever, well, have I? I think I've only ever gifted a specific sub, but I guess you just did an anonymous sub. Thanks. Thanks. She's a real sister. Lending me her cat, gifting a sub to my stream. Top tier sister. Don Caracol Clackold. Hello. Welcome to my reading stream. All right. Gabriel, hola. How are you? Okay. There's like a little definition here. Maybe I'll read it because we've come across this word. ITA. Ida. Ida? I don't know how to pronounce it. You know what? Instead of saying that, I should just look up the pronunciation. Ida. Pronunciation. Is it gonna know what I'm talking about? No. Ida from ANATHEM. Ida. Rhyming with cheetah. Ida. Ida. Oh, Gabriel, actually, this is it's the cat of my sister. Her name is Luna. Pokey is downstairs because she doesn't like being trapped upstairs anymore. Yes, Luna. I stole my sister's cat for stream today. Very naughty Luna. Okay. Ita. Actually, let me read this description. Oh, this is so like convoluted. I don't even think it'll make sense without being like, without you reading it yourself. So I'm just gonna go on and start reading it. A custom Pokey skin. Nada mejor que la comedia de uno o más gatos. Yeah. Agreed. The last night of 3689, the year, I dreamed that something was troubling Fra Orlo and that everyone had noticed. But on no account would he or anyone else speak of it openly. So it was a mystery, and yet everyone knew what it was. The planets were deviating from their courses, and the clock was wrong. Okay, wait. Sorry, I'm getting into reading mode. I'm like, what? But it's a dream. There we go. I was like, when did that happen? For part of the clock was an orrery, a mechanical model of the solar system that displayed the current positions of the planets and many of their moons. Oh, is that what that's called? I didn't know. It was in the narthex, or lobby, between the day gate and the north nave. It had been exactly correct for 34 centuries, but now it had gone out of whack. It's kind of funny that that's the expression used here. Gone out of whack. The marble, crystal, steel, and lapis spheres that represented the planets had moved to positions that were at odds with what Fra Orlo could plainly see even in the smallest of telescopes. Never mentioned in the dream, but understood by me, was that the problem must have something to do with the Ita, because the orrery was one of the systems driven by the devices that they tended in the vaulted cavern beneath the floor of the minster. Hold on. Gotta hear a consonant. You know what? I will read the definition of of Ida because we do need it. And then usually how they give definitions in this book is like in 3 different forms throughout time, or I guess like 3 different definitions that existed as time went on, from earliest to latest. So 1, in late praxic orth, an acronym, therefore in ancient texts sometimes written ITA, whose precise etymology is a casualty of the loss of shoddily preserved information that will forever enshroud the time of the harbingers and the terrible events. Almost all scholars agree that the first 2 letters come from the words information technology, which is late praxic age commercial bullshit for syntactic devices. Okay, the 3rd letter is disputed. Hypotheses include authority, associate, arm, archive, aggregator, amalgamated, analyst, agency, and assistant. Each of these, of course, suggests a different picture of what role the ITA might have performed in the years before the reconstitution, and so each tends to be advocated by a different suvine. Suvine? Another word I don't know. I like how Google is just showing me I think that's a made-up word because this is showing me Hindi names, which is not. Definition 2. In early New Orth, up to the 2nd Sac, a faculty of a consent devoted to the praxis of syntactic devices. And definition 3, in later New Orth, a proscribed artisanal caste tolerated in the 37 consents that were built around the great clocks. All of which are in technical violation of the 2nd Sac reforms in that their clocks were built with subsystems that employ syntactic devices. The task of the ITA is to operate and maintain those subsystems while observing strict segregation from the avowed. Artisanal caste tolerated in the 37 consents. Okay. So where were we? It's driven by the prices that attended, blah, 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 blah. The same system, it was rumored, affected subtle corrections to the rate of the main clock. If the error down in the cellar were not fixed, it would lead to greater errors that would be obvious to all, such as the bells chiming midday when the sun was not at its zenith, or the day gate opening before or after sunrise. In a universe governed by the usual logic, those errors would have cropped up later than the tiny discrepancies between the orrery and the planets. But in dream logic, it all happened at the same time, so that I was wondering what was troubling Fra Orlo, even as I saw the orrery show the phase of the moon wrong, which happened at the same time as burghers were wandering in through the day gate at midnight. But for some reason, none of those errors troubled me as much as the sounds emanating from the belfry. Also, is it belfry or belfry? Today's the day that I do not mispronounce words. Belfry. The bells ringing the wrong changes. I opened my eyes to hear Apert ringing, or so the other frauds in my cell speculated. There was no way of telling unless you listened carefully for a few minutes. The belfry movement could play fixed tunes, for example, to chime the hours. But to announce aughts and other events, our team of ringers would disengage that mechanism and ring changes, or permutations of tones. There was a pattern or code in them that we were taught to understand. This was supposedly so that messages could be cast to a sprawling consent without the people extramuros knowing what was being said. Not that there was anything secret about Apert. This was the first day of 3690. Therefore, Not only the day gate, but the Unarian and Decenarian gates would open at sunrise. Any extra who glanced at a calendar knew this perfectly well, and so did we. But for some reason, none of us would get out of bed and act upon it until we heard the right sequence of tones ring out from the belfry, a melody reversed, flipped upside down, and turned back on itself in a particular way. We sat up, 3 naked frauds in a cold cell with our bolts and cords and spheres all disheveled on the pallets. Such a day called for a formal rap, which was difficult to manage alone. Fra Holbein's feet had touched the floor first, so I leaned over and rummaged through his warm, stirred-up bolt until my fingers felt the fraying end, which I drew toward me. Fra Archibald, the third one in the cell, was the last to wake up. After some strong language from me and Holbein, he finally took up the selvage end. We went out into the corridor and stretched it between us. Fra Holbein had made it short, thick, and fuzzy for warmth. Archibald and I pleated Holbein's bolt, and then backed away from each other, as Holbein made it 3 times as long and much thinner. Cord wadded in his hand. He crawled under it and then stood so that it was tented over his left shoulder. Then all he had to do was swivel this way and that and raise and lower his arm at the right times, while Archibald and I moved about him like planets in an orrery, winding the bolt, spreading or bunching pleats as necessary. The finished wrap was notoriously unstable, so we held it in place for a minute while Holbein passed his cord over it in several places and tied a few important knots. Then he was free to partner with Archibald in getting my bolt around me. Finally, Holbein and I did it for Archibald. Archibald always liked to go last, so that he would get the best results. Not that he was vain. On the contrary, of all of our crop, he seemed best suited to live in a math. He was big and portly, and kept trying to grow a beard so that he could look more like the old Fra that he was destined to be. But unlike, say, Fra Leo, who invented new raps all the time, Archibald insisted on having it done right. When we were all clothed, we spent a few more minutes making extra passes with our cords and shaping the pleats that hooded our heads, just about the only part of this wrap where it was possible to show any individual style. Completed sandals were heaped on the ground next to the exit of the cell house. I kicked through them looking for a pair big enough for my feet. The discipline had been created by people who lived in warm places. It allowed each of the About to own a bolt, a cord, and a sphere, but it said nothing about footwear. That didn't trouble us much during the summer, but the weather was getting ready to turn cold. And during Apert, we might go extramuros and walk on city streets with broken glass and other hazards. We stretched the discipline a little bit, wearing tire sandals during Apert and soft-soled mucklucks during the winter months. The About of Sant Edhar had been doing this for a long time now, and the Inquisition hadn't come down on us yet, so it seemed that we were safe. I made a pair of sandals mine and tied them onto my feet. Imagine just every day you just have to grab whatever pair of sandals fit you because you don't actually own the shoes you wear. Oh, also I wanted to look up exactly what because this has come up a few times. Burger, ANATHEM. No. Oh, a burgher is a secular merchant or entrepreneur. Oh, okay. Burghers often possess great wealth and live in elaborate houses and estates. Oh wait, did it say summer? Oh wait, well, I'm trying to find... Oh yeah. I guess the door is always open in summer. Did they mention the actual word summer though? Oh wait, no, they do say summer. That didn't trouble us much during the summer. Yeah, they did say summer. I guess they were just mentioning Apert because, yeah, a yummy burger. They were saying Apert because that's when they're gonna go from inside the consent, like, to extramuros, outside, outside world that has pollution and litter, like broken glass on the ground. So they're gonna need stronger shoes than they normally wear. I guess in the summer they don't wear any shoes inside of the consent. But it said nothing about footwear. That didn't trouble us much during the summer. So they don't wear shoes in the summer. So they do need tire sandals to protect their feet during Apert when they leave, and then in winter for warmth. Finally, each of us took his sphere and made it fist-sized. As we strolled in the direction of the minster, we passed the knotted ends of our cords around these. These what? Oh, the spheres? Around these, weaving simple nets to entrap them. Then made the spheres inhale and swell to draw the cords taut. Each of us then made his sphere glow with a soft scarlet light. The light was so that we could see where we were going, and the color was to mark ourselves as tenors, which was necessary, since before long we'd be mixed up with the one-offs. When all of these preparations were finished, the sphere dangled from the right hip and swung against the thigh, which looked fascinating when a couple of hundred of us were converging on the minster in the dark. If you wanted to look like a real sant in a statue, you could cup the glowing sphere in one hand and stroke it with the other, while staring off into the distance as though mesmerized by the light of Snowis. Oh, I wanted to check if I'm pronouncing that right, too. Snowis. Because it looks like Canois, too. It's with a C. Wait, what? No. Autocorrect. Wow, it's not ANATHEM book. I like how there's no. Hold on. Oh, let's go to the wiki. Snowish. It doesn't say how to pronounce it. I'm just gonna keep saying Snowis then. Snowis. Oops, I lost my page. Staring off into the distance as though mesmerized by the light of Snowis. 40 about had risen earlier and gathered in the chancel. They were singing the processional of decennial Apert as we came in. Woven into this chant was a melody I had not heard in 10 years, or since I had stood inside the decade gate at sunrise and watched its stone and steel doors grind shut on everything I had ever known. To hear that melody now penetrated so deep into my brain that it literally threw me off balance, and I leaned into another fra, Leo, who for once did not use it as an excuse to flip me over his hip bone and slam me into the ground, but rather pushed me back up straight, as if I were a crooked icon, and turned his attention back to the art. All of the music was synchronized to the clock, which served as metronome and conductor. It went on for another quarter of an hour. No reading, no homily, just music. The sky was clear, and so, at the moment of sunrise, light washed down the well from the quartz prism at the top of the star henge. Oh, hola! You got that. The sky was clear, and so at the moment of sunrise, light washed down the well from the quartz prism at the top of the star henge. The music stopped. We extinguished our spheres. I had an impression that the light from above was emerald colored at first, or perhaps that was a trick of my eyes. By the time I'd blinked once, it had gone the color of the back of your hand when you shine a light through it in a dark cell. That was an unbearable moment of stillness when we all feared that, as in my dream, the clock was wrong and nothing would happen. Then the central weight began to drop. This happened every day at sunrise to open the day gate. But today, it was the signal for everyone to crane their necks and look up to where the Presidium's pillars pierced the minster's vault. We heard, then saw movement. It was happening! 2 of the weights were descending, riding down their rails to open the year gate and the decade gate. We all gasped and exclaimed and cheered, and many of us had to wipe our eyes. I could even hear the thousanders reacting to it behind their screen. The cube and the octahedron descended into plain view, and everyone roared. We applauded them as if they were celebrities at an award ceremony. How does this author know what a celebrity at an award ceremony is? As they neared the chancel floor, we hushed, as if fearing that they might smash into the ground. But as they got closer, they slowed, and finally crept to a halt, only a hand's breadth above the floor. Then we all laughed. In some ways, this was ridiculous. The clock was but a mechanism. It had no choice at this moment but to let those weights drop. Yet to see it happen created a feeling that can't be conveyed to one who was not there. The choir was supposed to break into polyphonic singing now, and they almost couldn't. But the raggedness of their voices was a music of its own. Outside, beneath the singing, I could hear the sound of running waters. And then here we have a little definition of avowed. A person who has sworn a vow. So what I understood as avowed is like one of the devouts living inside the content. A person who has sworn a vow to submit himself or herself to the Cartesian discipline for 1 or more years, a fra or sur. Or 2, a plurality of such persons. 3, a formally constituted community of such persons. For example, a chapter or a math. All right. There's no right way to build a clock, Fra Corlandon used to say when he was teaching us modern, post-Reconstitution history. This was his euphemistic way of saying that Sant Edhar's praxis had been a little bit crazy. Wait, there's no right way, okay. Our content was nestled in the crook of a river, where it dodged around... Wait, is this the right... I can skip a page, did I? Okay. Our content was nestled in the crook of a river, where it dodged around one end of a range of rocky bluffs, the terminus of a mountain range that stretched for hundreds of miles to the northeast and whose glaciers and snowpacks formed the river's headwaters. Just upstream was a series of cataracts. We could hear them at night if the slines weren't making too much noise. Below them, the river, as though resting from all the excitement, ran still and gentle for some distance, curving across a well-drained prairie. Part of that prairie, and 1.5 miles of the river, were encompassed by our walls. That buenas noches. Up at the cataract, the river was easily bridged, and so a settlement tended to be there. During some eras, it would grow and engulf our walls, and office workers in skyscrapers would gaze down on the tops of our bastions. Okay, so there's like super modern world outside, so I guess he would know what celebrities at award ceremonies were if he joined this monk society, 8 years ago? And there's like skyscrapers and stuff. At other times, it would ebb and recede to a tiny fueling station or gun emplacement at the river crossing. Our stretch of the river was hazardous, with rust-eaten girders and lumps of moss-covered synthetic stone, the remains of bridges that had been raised at that crossing and, in later ages, collapsed and washed downstream. Most of our land and almost all of our buildings were on the inside of the river bend, but we had claimed a strip on the far bank and built our fortifications there. Walls parallel to the river where it ran straight, bastions where it bent. 3 of those bastions housed gates. 1 each for the Unarian gate was up on the mountain and worked differently. Hold on, I'm going to read that again because I want to create the exact structural visualization in my head. Most of our land and almost all of our buildings were on the inside of the river bend, and we had claimed a strip on the far bank and built our fortifications there. Walls parallel to the river where it ran straight, bastions where it bent. 3 of those bastions housed gates, each one for the Unarian, Decenarian, and Centenarian maths. The Millenarian gate was up on the mountain and worked differently. Each gate was a pair of doors, supposed to swing open and closed at certain times. This had posed a problem for the praxics, in that the gates were situated far away and on the opposite side of a river, from the clock that was supposed to command the opening. The praxics had done it with water power, far outside of our walls, upstream of the cataract. Therefore, at an altitude well above our heads, they had carved a pool, like an open cistern, out of the river's stony course, and made it feed an aqueduct that cut due south toward the minster, bypassing the cataract, the bridge, and the bend. After rushing through a short tunnel and loping on stone stilts across half a mile of broken terrain, this dove into the ground and became a buried pipe that passed beneath what was now a settled neighborhood of burghers. Oh, every time I read that word, instead of what wealthy merchants or entrepreneurs, I'm just imagining hamburgers. The water in that pipe, pressurized by gravity, erupted in a pair of fountains from the pond that lay just outside of the day gate. The water in that pipe, okay, pressurized by gravity, erupted in a pair of fountains from the pond, okay. A causeway ran across the middle of that pond, connecting the central square of the burghers' town at its northern end to our day gate at its southern, and passing right between those 2 fountains. Cheeseburger emotes for ANATHEM. The elevation of the pond was still above that of the river and plain. Drains were plumbed into its bottom and throttled by monumental ball valves of polished granite. One of them fed a series of ponds, canals, and fountains that beautified the primates' compound and, farther downstream, formed part of the barrier between the Unarian and the Decenarian maths. 3 other drains were connected to systems of pipes, siphons, and aqueducts that ran out toward the year, decade, and century gates. Those systems were dry except at Apert. Now the clock's descending weights had opened 2 valves and allowed water to rush from the pond to flood the year and decade systems. In some ways, maybe this was a crazy and ramshackle way to do it, but there was one advantage that wasn't obvious to me until that day. The waterworks had been designed to fill up slowly, so after the rite concluded, we were able to spill out of the minster and follow the water at a brisk walking pace as it charged an aqueduct that ran alongside the 7 stairs, skirted the cloister, and reached across the black toward the river. You demand 1 burger per page. All right. Well, there was one on this page so far. A stone bridge crossed the river there, anchored on the near bank by a round tower, and on the far by a bastion in the convent's outer wall. Within the round tower was a cistern, now being filled by water from the aqueduct, with a pitcher lip poised above the pedals of a water wheel. Most of us reached it in time to see the cistern overflow, and the wheel began to turn, accepting energy from the water before exhausting it into the river. By stainless steel gears, the wheel rotated a shaft as thick as my thigh that ran across the bridge. You might mistake it for a very stout railing if you didn't know what it was for. Across the river, inside of the bastion, the shaft drove another set of gears that was connected directly to the hinge pins around which the gate swung. I don't know. I think because when I was like testing my chat box, because I was rearranging my overlays, I think when you type the same emote more than once, it gives you a combo. No, not himself. The thing that rotates the water wheel. The stainless steel, by stainless steel gears, the wheel rotated a shaft. Like the thing, the shaft was as thick as his thigh. I mean, it's not necessarily calling himself thick, it's just the objective width of his thigh, whether that be subjectively thick or skinny thigh. Well, I guess he said you might mistake it for a very stout railing, but a railing itself is thin, so a stout railing could just be normal width, medium width. Thick. Hearing them move, we ran toward them, but slowed as we got closer, not knowing what was about to happen. Well, actually, we had a pretty good idea, but I was still young enough that I could let myself forget about Diax's rake when I was in love with some idea. Orlo's yarn about a math that floated freely in time. Wait, what? Orlo's yarn about a math that floated freely in time. Is that like Orlo's like telling? About a math that floated freely in time, surfing on cross currents of causal domain shear had really stirred my emotions, and so for a few moments I let my imagination run away and pretended that I lived in such a math and that I really had no idea what might be found outside its gates when they opened. Oh, it's like rant? Like, I've never seen that word. I only know yarn, like knitting yarn. Oh, sorry. Used as an informal noun or verb, spinning a yarn refers to telling an elaborate, long, or adventurous story. To yarn. I'm yarning. Yeah, I didn't know that verb. Learned another word. Yarn. I let my imagination run away and pretended that I lived in such a math, and that I really had no idea what might be found outside its gates when they opened. Mobs of jumped-up slines rushing in with pitchforks or Molotovs. Starving ones crawling in to worry potatoes out of the ground. I didn't know you could use worry that way. Like digging out, pulling, desperately. Moshianic pilgrims expecting to see the face of some god or other. Corpses strewn to the horizon. Virgin wilderness. The most interesting moment was when the gap between the gates grew just wide enough to admit a single person. Who would it be? Male or female? Old or young? Carrying an assault rifle, a baby, a chest of gold, or a backpack bomb? Sometimes the writing is like kind of funny. I don't know. Burgers and potatoes. They didn't say burgers yet. On this page, I mean. As the doors continued to open, we were able to make out perhaps 30 seculars who had gathered to watch. Several were planted facing the gate, all sharing the same awkward stance. After a while, I figured out that these were aiming spielecaptors at us, or holding up G-jaws to send feeds to people far away. I wonder what's the difference between a Speely captor and a G-jaw. Is that it's just like different technology? It's like JEEJAH. Is a small device comparable to a smartphone. Okay. G-jaw. And then a Speely captor is like a dedicated camera. So many words I gotta look up. A device used for recording Speelies, like an Earth video camera. Okay. G-jaws may G-jaws may include Speely captor functionality. Got that? Imagine a G-jaw with no camera. No. What did they say? A G-jaw has Speely captor capability. You're ready for emote only chat mode. By the way, the emote wall is working, right? I put one. I haven't been looking. Some of them? Here, I'll... Oh, there we go. Okay. I haven't been looking. I think emote wall is so fun. I like the way it looks. Oop, and I almost forgot. Looney is still here. Being such a sleepy cat. The treats did their job. So maybe 5 treats will equal like 1.5 hours of sleepy time. Where was I? I'll just start the paragraph over. As the doors continued to open, we were able to make out perhaps 30 seculars who had gathered to watch. Several were planted facing the gate, all sharing the same awkward stance. After a while, I figured out that these were aiming Speely captors at us, or holding up G-jaws to send feeds to people far away. A small child sat on her father's shoulders, eating something, perhaps a burger. Eating something. She was already bored and wriggling to be let down. He bent and twisted at the hips and insisted through clenched teeth that she watch, just for another minute. 8 children in identical clothes stood in a row, watched over by a lady. These must have come from one of the burgers, Suvins. Is Suvins like a neighborhood? I tried to look that word up, but it didn't show anything. A desolate woman, looking as though she'd survived a natural disaster that hadn't touched anyone else, whoa, walked slowly toward the gate, carrying a bundle that I suspected was a newborn infant. Yeah, she said it. Half a dozen men and women were gathered around something that smoked. A campfire? Oh, wait, no. This artifact was surrounded by a loose revetment of large, brightly colored boxes on which some of them sat, and better to eat their enormous drooling sandwiches. Oh, the better to eat their... Why he gotta describe their sandwiches like that? Their enormous drooling sandwiches. Oh my god. Half-forgotten flukish words came to me. Barbecue. Cooler. Cheeseburg. Not cheeseburger. Cheeseburg. What? He's talking about he saw people eating around like a little barbecue pit or whatever, and he's remembering flukish, like the modern language words, before he moved into the consent 8 years ago. All right, Neal Stephenson. What? I don't know, the writing is kind of funny. One man had planted himself in a disk of open space, or perhaps the others were just avoiding him, and was waving a banner on the end of a pole. the flag of the secular power. His posture was defiant, triumphant. Another man shouted into a device that made his voice louder. Some sort of deolator, I guessed, who wanted us to join his arc. The first to enter were a man and woman dressed in the kinds of clothes that people wore extramuros to attend a wedding or make an important commercial transaction, and 3 children in miniature renditions of those clothes. The man was towing behind him a red wagon carrying a pot with a sapling growing out of it. Each of the children had a hand on the rim of the pot so that it wouldn't topple as the wagon's wheels felt their way over the cobbles. The woman, unencumbered, moved faster, but in a gait that looked all wrong until I recollected that women extramuros wore shoes that made them walk so. She was smiling but also wiping tears from her eyes. She headed straight for Grand Sur Yelma, whom she seemed to recognize, and began explaining that her father, who had died 3 years ago, had been a great supporter of the consent and liked to go in the day gate to attend lectures and read books. When he had died, his grandchildren had planted this tree, and now they hoped to see it transplanted to a suitable location on our grounds. Grand Sur Yelma said that that would be fine, provided it was of the 164. The burger lady assured Yelma that, knowing our rules, they had gone to all sorts of trouble to make sure that this was so. Meanwhile, her husband was prowling around taking pictures of this conversation with a jija. Seeing that we had not massacred the burger family or inserted probes into their orifices, a young assistant to the man with the sound amplification device came in and began to approach us one by one, handing us leaves with writing on them. So on this page, we got 2 burgers and 1 cheeseburger. Well, I'm not annotating it as I'm reading on stream, but I was annotating. These are the pages that ripped or fell out of my book that I need to glue back. But I was annotating. I feel like highlighting every single burger that I see. Unfortunately, they were in kinograms, and so we could not read them. We had been warned that it was best to accept such things politely and claim we would read them later, not engage such persons in Thelanean dialogue. This man noticed the desolate woman. Guessing that she meant to leave her baby with us, he began trying to talk her out of it in slangy flukish. She recoiled. Then, understanding that she was probably safe, began cursing at him. 6 Surs moved forward to surround her. The deolator became furious and looked as if he might strike someone. I noticed Fra Delracones for the first time, watching this fellow closely and making eye contact with several burly Fras who were moving closer to him. But then the man with the sound device chirped out a word that must have been the younger fellow's name. Having got his attention, he looked up at the sky for a moment. "The powers that be are watching, idiot!" then glared at him. "Simmer down and keep handing out the all-important literature." Achievement unlocked. A tall man was walking toward me, Artisan Quinn. Next to him was a shorter copy of Quinn, without the beard. "Bon Apert, Fra Erasmus," Quinn said. "Bon Apert, Artisan Quinn," I returned, and then looked at his son. Wait, they can have children? His son was looking at my left foot. His gaze traveled quickly up to the top of my hood, but did not catch or linger on my face, as if this were of no more note than a wrinkle in my bolt. "Bon," I began, but he interrupted. "That bridge is built on the arch principle." "Barb, the Fra is wishing you bon apert," said Quinn, and held out his hand in my direction. But Barb actually reached out and pulled his father's arm down. It was blocking his view of the bridge. The bridge has a catenary curve because of the vectors, Barb went on. Barb sounds like a big nerd. Forgot to ban Quinn. The bridge has a curve because of the vectors. What's a catenary curve? Catenary. That's from the Orth word for, I began. It's from the Orth word for chain, Barb announced. It is the same curve that a hanging chain makes, flipped upside down, but the drive shaft that opens the gate has to be straight, unless it was made with new matter. His eyes found my sphere and studied it for a few moments. But that can't be, because the consent of Sant Edhar was built after the first sack, so it must have been made with old matter. His eyes went back to the drive shaft, which seemed to follow the arch of the bridge, passing through blocks of carved stone at regular intervals. Those stone things must contain universal joints, he concluded. That is correct, I said. The shaft is put together from 8 straight pieces connected by universal joints. Hidden, I feel like I need to read in a super nerdy voice for that little boy. Or his son. I don't know how little he is. The shaft is put together from 8 straight pieces connected by universal joints hidden inside the bases of those statues. The base of a statue is called a plinth. And Barb began to walk very fast. He was the first extra to cross over the bridge into our math. Quinn gave me a look that was difficult to interpret and hustled after him. An altercation had flared up between the desolate woman and the sewers. Apparently, this woman had been told by some ignorant person that we'd give her money for her baby. The Sirs had set her straight as gently as they knew how. Imagine. Several more extras had come in. Oh my god, I feel like they're just gonna be dealing with a bunch of ridiculous stuff today. Several more extras had come in. Like, I'm just imagining, like, the closest thing this seems like is like a monastery or something. Imagine like there's like an event, like a daily open house, or it's not a yearly open house, and there's a woman who brings her baby and thinks the monastery is going to give her money for her baby. Several more extras had come in. A group of half a dozen, mostly men, all wearing clothes that were respectful but not expensive. They had engaged a small group of mostly older about. The foremost of the visitors was draped in a thick, gaudy-colored rope with a globe at the end. I reckoned he was the priest of some newfangled counter-Bosian ark. He was talking to Fra Haligastream. Haligastream. Big, bald, burly, and bearded. Looking... Oh, wait, what's that literary tool called? Alliteration? Fra League of Legends. A big, bald, burly beard, looking as if he just stepped off the Pericline, after a brisk discussion of ontology with Thelines. He was a theoretical geologist and the FAE of the Adherian chapter. He was listening politely, but kept throwing significant glances at a pair of purple-bolted hierarchs standing off to the side, Delracones, the warden fendant, and Statho, the primate. Circumventing this group, I passed in earshot of a side conversation. Oh my god, I think this section of pages is about to rip out too. Circumventing this group, I passed in earshot of a side conversation. One of the women visitors had engaged Fra Jessry. I put her age at about 30, though the way that extramuros women did their hair and faces made it difficult to guess such things. On second thought, she was dressed up 25. She was paying close attention to Jessry, asking him questions about life and the math. After what seemed like a long time, I got Jessry's attention. He politely told the woman that he had made arrangements to go extramuros with me. She looked at me, which I enjoyed. Then her Jija spat out a burst of notes, and she excused herself to take a call. Oh, here we have a definition for sline. 1. In flukish of the late Praxic age and early reconstitution, a slang word formed by truncation of baseline, which is a Praxic commercial bullshit term. Oh, they write so weird. Commercial bullshit term. It appears to be a noun that turned into an adjective meaning common or widely shared. 2. A noun denoting an extramuros person with no special education, skills, aspirations, or hope of acquiring same? I think there's a typo. I think they mean or hope of acquiring some. A noun denoting an extramuros person with no special education, skills, aspirations, or hope of acquiring some. So therefore, I think we are all slines. We are all baselines. 3. Derogatory term for a stupid or uncouth person, especially one who takes pride in those very qualities. Note, this sense is deprecated because it implies that a sline is a sline because of inherent personal shortcomings or perverse choices. Sense. Sense, too, is preferred because it does not convey any such implications. Okay. Jessry and I walked out for the first time in 10 years. The first thing I noticed was that people had leaned a lot of junk against the outside of our walls. Apparently, some of it had even been leaned against the gates, but someone had cleared it off to the sides in preparation for Apert. During this era, the neighborhood outside the Decade Gate was where artisans kept their shops, and so the stuff leaned against the walls tended to be lumber, pipes, reels of cable or tubing, and long-handled tools. We walked silently for a while, just looking. But sooner than you might think, we got used to it and forgot we were frauds. Do you think that woman wanted to have a liaison with you? I asked. What do you call it? An Atlantean liaison. You're in this book too, Jose. Named after a Decenarian Fra of the 17th century AR, who saw his true love for 10 days every 10 years and spent the rest of the time writing poems to her and sneaking them out of the math. They were really fine poems, carved in stone some places. So there was a man named Atlan. Right? If it's Atlantean, then his name was Atlan. You are a Decenarian Fra. Quite a romantic story, don't you think? Would you do that for me? Such true love. 10 days every 10 years. Oh my God, can you imagine? Why do you think a woman would want that? He wondered. Well, no risk of getting pregnant when your partner is a Fra, I pointed out. That might be important sometimes, but I think it's easy for them to obtain contraception in this epoch. I was kind of joking. Oh, sorry. Well, maybe she wants me for my mind or your spiritual qualities. Huh? You think she's some kind of dilator? Oh, why does that show? Fantasma del Abismo. Thank you for the follow. The ideal amount? Wait, what are you talking? Oh, the freaking 10 days every 10 years is the ideal amount of interaction for you? Oh my, this conversation is like pretty funny. Okay, so like Jessry was talking to a woman, and then now me, Erasmus, is like asking him, do you think she wanted to have a liaison? And he's like, why do you think a woman would want that? And then I say, well, no risk of getting pregnant when your partner is a fra. That made me... Well, I was kind of, oh, well, maybe she wants me for my mind or your spiritual qualities. Huh? You think she's some kind of deal later? Didn't you see who she was with? Some sort of, who knows, a contingent, I think is what they call it. Those were Warden of Heaven people, I'll bet. Their leader was got up in a kind of imitation of a cord. Yeah, women are about, those are the Surs, like the Grand Sur, Yelma, and what was the one in the first chapter? Grand Sur, the one teaching the kids. Grand Sur, oh my god, my pages are gonna fall out. Do you remember? It was like in the later part of the chapter. Oh my god, what was her name? Also the warden of Warden Offendant, one of the hierarchs. Oh, Grancer Tamura. I like how Luna's here. I just keep forgetting that she's here. Looney the darkness. Looney the nice, calm darkness. Her face kind of looks like a cute monkey. Or a weasel. Ooh, Looney. Looney. She likes licking like a dog. Looney. Sleepy. Sleepy Looney. I'm not blocking her, right? Okay. A good view of the kitty. Oh, the Warden of Heaven. I think that was like the fake religion outside the walls. That's like taking advantage of the fact that people outside don't really know much about what's happening inside. So then, yeah, people make fake religions. Their leader was got up in a kind of imitation of a cord. We had gone far enough that the decade gate was lost to view around a curve. I glanced up at the Presidium. The megaliths rising up from the perimeter of the Starhenge served as compass points to help me establish my bearings. We had come to a larger road now, running roughly parallel to the river. If we crossed it and kept going, we'd climb into a neighborhood of big houses where burgers lived. If we followed it to the right, I need a burger button on my Stream Deck. When I push it, like burger emotes galore or something. I don't know. or a burger hat to wear. What? So stupid. Little does the author know that burgers would be such a big deal. At least a command, yeah. Command burger. Something's trigger a random a wonderful burger event. You're not so sure? Look, I'm gonna look it up. I need a bookmark pen. Not Speely Capture. Burger. Anathem. Let's see, a Reddit. McDonald's. Oh my god, you should tweet that. Wait, they're like quoting something from the book. We could sell the honey to burgers in the market stall before the day gate, when conditions outside were post-apocalyptic. We could eat it. Why did they mention this quote? Someone say, speaking of Andrew, is there any advice you can give while reading it? I've started a couple times, but I banned it quickly because I just can't get into its rhythm and language. There's a lot of language stuff, but I feel like if you take your time. No funny stuff about burgers. No. Let's see. Let's see what else. No. Are there comments on the wiki? No. Nope. No funny stuff about burgers. I wonder where he got that word from. A merchant or entrepreneur? Why burger? Business. Burgers are well, can be more educated, but in a much more superficial manner than the avowed. Oh, is it? Burger meaning origin. No, not what a burger. A burger word. Not hamburger. Oh, you mean bourgeois? That's not burger. The shortened-formed burger first appeared in print in 1939, short for hamburger. Oh, bourgeois. I guess, yeah, that's like middle class, right? Business? Like merchants? Business owners, merchants, wealthy individuals who emerged during the late Middle Ages. Oh, bourgeois. How about bourgeois burger? Oh my god. Spanish, it's burguesa, is like hamburguesa. It's like the same word. If you are looking for a bourgeois burger, you may be referring to a premium or luxury style of burger, often featuring ingredients like dry-aged beef, wagyu, truffle, or brioche buns. No. Word. Oh. Oh, burger. Oh, it sounds like you might be looking for the slang term bougie. Oh my god, these Google AI suggest whatever summaries answers. Oh, I see. What is the difference between bourgeois and burger with a B like H Burgher? Burger. Burger with an H? What's that? Historically defined as a citizen or freeman of a medieval European town or borough, typically belonging to the merchant or upper middle class. They were distinct from rural peasants and often held specific municipal privileges, such as the right to vote, trade, and govern. Medieval. Okay, so I think it must be that burger. Maybe burger came first and then bourgeois came after that. In the Middle Ages. Okay, so nothing in this book is super random. There's always a reason. Wait, Looney? What kind of burger are you, Looney? I think she's a double cheese. Double cheese, a double patty. Hold the mustard burger. Los burgueses eran la clase media o acomodada. Okay, yeah. In the Middle Ages. Alright, where was I? Enough burgers. Where was the last burger I read? Oh, okay, they were walking. We had come to a larger road now, running roughly parallel to the river. If we crossed it and kept going, we'd climb into a neighborhood of big houses where burghers lived. If we followed it to the right, it would take us to the commerce district and we could eventually loop back in through the day gate. To the left, it ran out into the faux burbs, where I had spent my first 8 years. Let's get this over with, I said, and turned left. After we had gone a few paces, Jeffrey said, "Again?" Which was his annoying way of requesting clarification. "The Warden of Heaven?" "Moshianics," I said, and then spent a while telling him about Fra Orlo's interviews with Fleck and Quinn. As we went along, the nature of the place changed. Fewer workshops, more warehouses. Barges could navigate this stretch of the river, and so it was where people tended to store things. We saw more vehicles now, a lot of drummons, which had up to a dozen wheels and were used for carrying large, heavy objects around districts like this. These looked the same as I remembered. A few fetches scurried around with smaller loads, secured to their backs. These were more colorful. The men who owned them tended to be artisans, and it was clear that they spent a lot of time altering the vehicle's shape and color, apparently for no reason other than to amuse themselves. Or maybe it was a kind of competition, like plumage on birds. Anyway, the styles had changed quite a bit, and so Jessry and I would stop talking and stare whenever a particularly strange or gaudy fetch went by. Their driver stared right back at us. Well, I was oblivious to all that Warden of Heaven stuff, Jessry concluded. I've been very busy computing for Orlo's group. "Why did you think Tamara was drilling us last night?" I asked. "I didn't think about it," Jessry said. "All I can say is it's good you are around to be aware of all this. Have you considered joining the new circle? Angling to become a hierarch?" "Yeah. No, I don't have to, because everyone else seems to be considering it for me." "Sorry, Raz," he said, not really sounding sorry, more miffed that I had become miffed. He was hard to talk to, and sometimes I'd go months avoiding him, but slowly I'd learned it could be worth the aggravation. "Forget it," I said. "What have Orlo's group been up to?" "I've no idea. I just do the calculations. Orbital mechanics. Theorical or totally praxic. You think they have found a planet around another star?" "How could that be? For that, they have to collate information from other telescopes, and we haven't gotten anything in 10 years, obviously." "So it's something nearer," I said. "Something that can be picked out with our telescopes." "It's an asteroid," Jessry said, fed up with my slow progress on the riddle. "Is it the Big Nugget?" This book was for sure written in a McDonald's. "Is it the Big Nugget?" Capitalized. "Orla would be a lot more excited in that case." This was a very old joke. The Panjan drums. Oh my god, Looney's twitching in her sleep. A Big Nugget, capitalized. I think that's the name of an asteroid or something. The Panjan drums had almost no use for us, but one of the few things that might change that would be the discovery of a large asteroid that was about to hit Arbor. In 1107, it had almost happened. Thousands of Avout had been brought together in a convox that had built a spaceship to go nudge it out of the way. But by the time the ship had been launched in 1115, oh my god, Luna's like meowing in her sleep. I think she's having a crazy dream. Yeah, oh my god, a fast food bingo. What's next? French fries, nugget, burger. Do you know what pesadilla? Yeah, maybe. Honey. I don't want to startle her awake. But by the time the ship had been launched in 1115, the cosmographers had calculated that the rock would just miss us, and so it had turned into a study mission. The lab where they'd built the ship was now the consent of Saint Rob, after the cosmographer who had discovered the rock. To our right, the hill where the Burgers lived had petered out. A tributary of the river cut across our path from that direction. The road crossed it on an ancient steel bridge, built, rusted, decayed, condemned, and pasted back together with new matter. I wonder what new matter is. Is it like plastic? Oh, quitatero. A dotted line, worn away to near invisibility, hinted to motorists that they might consider showing a little civility to pedestrians between the rightmost lane and the railing. This is really funny writing. It was a bit late for us to double back now, and we could see another pedestrian pushing a cart piled high with poly bags, so we hustled over as quickly as we could manage, trusting the Drummonds, Fetches, and Mobes not to strike us dead. To our left, we could see the tributary winding through its floodplain toward the join with the main river a mile away. When I'd been younger, the angle between the two watercourses had been mostly trees and marsh, but it looked as though they had put up a levee to fend off high water, and then shingled it with buildings, most obviously, a large roofless arena with thousands of empty seats. "Shall we go watch a game?" Fra Jesri asked. I couldn't tell whether he was serious. Of all of us, he looked the most like an athlete. He didn't play sports often, but when he did, he was determined and angry, and tended to do well, even though he had few skills. "I think you need money to get in. Maybe we could sell some honey." "We don't have any of that either. Maybe later in the week." Jesri did not seem very satisfied with my answer. "It's too early in the morning for them to be having a game," I added. A minute later, he had a new proposal. "Let's pick a fight with some slines." We were almost to the end of the bridge. We had just scurried out of the path of a fetch operated by a man about our age who drove it as if he had been chewing jumpweed, with one hand on the controls and the other pressing a G-jaw to the side of his face. So we were physically excited, breathing rapidly, and the idea of getting into a fight seemed a tiny bit less stupid than it would have otherwise. I smiled and considered it. Jesri and I were strong from winding the clock, and many of the extras were in terrible condition. I understood now what Quinn had meant when he'd said that they were starving to death and dying from being too fat at the same time. Looney? When I looked back at Jesri, he scowled and turned his face away. He didn't really want to get into a fight with slines. We had entered into the faux burb where I had come from. A whole block had been claimed by a building that looked like a megastore, but was apparently some new counter-Bosnian arc. In the lawn before it was a white statue, 50 feet high, of some bearded prophet holding up a lantern and a shovel. The roadside ditches were full of jumpweed and slashberry poking up through the sediments of discarded packaging. Beneath a gray film of congealed exhaust, faded kinograms fidgeted like maggots trapped in a garbage bag. The kinograms, the logos, the names of the snacks were new to me, but in essence it was all the same. I knew now why Jesri was being a jerk. "It's disappointing," I said. "Yeah," Jesri said. "All these years reading the chronicles and hearing strange tales told every day at Provenor, I guess it's sort of raised our expectations," he said. "Yeah." Something occurred to me. "Did Orlo ever talk to you about the 10,000ers? Causal domain shear and all that?" Jesri looked at me funny, surprised that Orlo had confided in me. I nodded. "That is a classic example of the crap they feed us to make it seem more exciting than it really is." But I sensed Jesri had only just decided this. If Orlo was talking to all the Fits about it, how special could it be? "They're not feeding us crap, Jesri. It's just that we live in boring times." He tried a new tack. "It's a recruiting strategy, or, to be precise, a retention strategy." What does that mean? Our only entertainment is waiting for the next Apert, to see what's out there when the gates open. When the answer turns out to be the same crap except dirtier and uglier, what can we do besides sign up for another 10 years and see if it's any different next time? Or go in deeper? Become a hundreder? Haven't you realized that's worthless for us? Because their next Apert is our next Apert, I said. And then we die before the next one after that. It's not that rare to live to 130, I demurred, which only proved that I had done the same calculation in my head and come to the same conclusion as Jessry. He snorted. You and I were born too early to be hundreders, and too late to be thousanders. A couple of years earlier, and we might have been foundlings and gone straight to the crag. In which case, we'd both die before seeing an Apert, I said. Besides, I might have been a foundling, but from what you've said of your birth family, I don't think you'd have. We'll see soon enough, he said. We covered a mile in silence. Even though we didn't say anything, we were in dialogue. A peregrine dialogue, meaning two equals wandering around trying to work something out, as opposed to a Suvinian dialogue, where a fid is being taught by a mentor, or a Periclean dialogue, which is combat. The road dovetailed into a larger one lined with the mass-produced businesses where Slines obtained food and stuff, enlivened by casinos, windowless industrial cubes wrapped in colored light. Back in some day, when there had been more vehicles, the full width of the right-of-way had been claimed by striped lanes. Now there were a lot of pedestrians and people getting around on scooters and wheeled planks and pedal-powered contraptions. But instead of going in straight lines, they, and we, had to stitch together routes joining the pavement slabs that surrounded the businesses, as the sea surrounds a chain of islands. The slabs were riven with meandering cracks marked by knife-thin hedges of jumpweed that had been straining dirt and wrappers out of the wind for a long time. The sun had gone behind clouds shortly after dawn, but now it came out again. We ducked into the shade of a business that sold tires of different colors to young men who wanted to prettify their fetches and their souped-up mobes, and spent a minute rearranging our boats to protect our heads. You want something, I said. You're grumpy you don't have it yet. I don't think that what you want is stuff, because you've paid no attention at all to any of this. I jerked my head at a display of iridescent new matter tires. Moving pictures of naked women with distended breasts came and went on the sides of the wheels. Jessry watched one of the moving pictures for a while, then shrugged. I suppose I could leave and learn to like such things. Frankly, it seems pretty stupid. Maybe it helps if you eat what they eat. We moved on across the pavement slab. Look, I said, it's been understood at least since the Praxic age that if you have enough all-swell floating around in your bloodstream, your brain will tell you in 100 different ways that everything is all right. And if you don't, you end up like you and me, he said. I tried to become angry, then surrendered with a laugh. All right, I said. Let's go with that. A minute ago, we passed a stand of Blythe in the median strip. I saw it too, and the one by the pre-owned pornography store. Pre-owned pornography. That one looked fresher. We could go pick it and eat it, and eventually the level of all-swell in our blood would go up, and we could live out here or anywhere and feel happy. Or we could go back to the consent and try to come by our happiness honestly. You are so gullible, he said. You're supposed to be the Adherian's golden boy, I said. You're supposed to be the one who swallows this stuff without question. I'm surprised, frankly. And what are you now, Raz? The cynical Procyon? So people seem to think. Look, Jessry said, I see the older about working hard, those who have upsight, who are illuminated by the light of Snowis. He said this in a mocking tone. He was so frustrated that he veered and lunged in random ways as he moved from one thought to the next. They do theorics. Those who aren't so gifted fall back and cut stone or keep bees. The really miserable ones leave or throw themselves off the minster. Those who remain seem happy, whatever that means. Certainly happier than the people out here. I disagree, Jessry said. These people are as happy as, say, Frau Erlo. They get what they want. Naked ladies on their wheels. He gets what he wants. upsight to the mysteries of the universe. Let's get down to it then. What do you want? Something to happen, he said. I almost don't care what. If you made a great advance in theorics, would that count? Sure, but what are the odds I'll do that? It depends on the givens coming in from the observatories. Right. So it's out of my control. What do I do in the meantime? Oh my god, my leg is falling asleep. And Looney's asleep too. Right, so it's out of my control. What do I do in the meantime? Study theorics, which you're so good at. Drink beer. Have Tyvian liaisons with as many sirs as you can talk into it. Why is that so bad? He was devoting way too much attention to kicking a stone ahead of him, watching it bound across the pavement. I kept looking at the shrimpy guys in the stained glass windows, he said. Huh? You know, the windows depicting the saints themselves. They're always shown big. They fill most of the window. But if you look close, you can see tiny little figures in bolts and cords. Huddled around their knees, I said. Yeah, looking up at the sant adoringly. The helpers, the fids, the second-raters who proved a lemma or read a draft somewhere along the way. No one knows their names, except maybe the cranky old fra who takes care of that one window. You don't want to end up as a knee hugger, I said. That is correct. How does that work? Why some, but not others? So you want a window all to yourself? It'd mean that something interesting happened to me, he said. Something more interesting than this. And if it came to a choice between that and having enough all's well in your blood? He thought about that as we waited for a huge, articulated Drummond to come back out of our way. Finally, you ask an interesting question, he said, and after that he was quite a pleasant companion. Half an hour later, I pronounced us lost. Jessry accepted it with pleasure, as if this were more satisfactory than being found. A boxy vehicle rolled past. That is the third coach full of children that has gone by us recently, Jessry pointed out. Did you have a Suvin in your neighborhood? Places like this don't have Suvins, I reminded him. They have stables. Oh, are Suvins like teachers? Or schools? Oh, yes. That comes from, it's an old flukish word, cultural stabilization centers. But don't say that because no one has called them that in something like 3,000 years. Right. Stables it is. We turned to where the coaches turned. For the next minute or so, things were fragile between us. Inside the math, it didn't matter that he had come from Burgers and I had come from Slines. But as soon as we had stepped out of the decade gate, this fact had been released, like a bubble of swamp gas deep in dark water. Invisibly, it had been rising and expanding ever since, and had just now erupted in a great flaming, stinking belch. My old stable looked, in my eyes, like a half-scale reproduction of itself thrown together by a sloppy model maker. Some of the rooms had been boarded up. In my day, they'd been crowded. So that confirmed that the population was declining. Perhaps by the time I was a grandfa, there would be a young forest here. Hold on, we turned where this rose there for the next minute. Inside the math, it didn't matter that he come from birth and I had come from Slines. Okay. An empty coach pulled out of the drive. Before the next drew up to take its place, I glimpsed a crowd of youngsters staggering under huge backpacks into a canyon of raucously colored light, a breezeway lined with machines dispensing snacks, drinks, and attention-getting noises. From there, they would carry their breakfasts into rooms, which Jessry and I could see through windows. In some, the children all watched the same program on a single large screen. In others, each had his or her own panel. To one end, the blank wall of the gymnasium was booming with low-frequency rhythms of a sports program. I recognized the beat. It was the same one they had used when I was there. Jessry and I had not seen moving pictures in 10 years or so. We stood there for a few minutes, hypnotized. But I had got my bearings now, and once I had nudged Jessry back into motion, I was able to lead us down the streets I had wandered as a boy. People here were as keen to modify their houses as their vehicles. And so when I did recognize a dwelling, it would have a new freestanding roof lofted above the old one, or new modules plugged and pasted onto the ones I saw when I dreamed about the place. But I was helped by the fact that the neighborhood was half the size of what I remembered. We found where I'd lived before I was collected. 2 shelter modules joined into an L, another L of wire mesh completing a weedy cloister that housed 1 dead mobe and 2 dead fletches, the oldest of which I had personally helped set up on blocks. The gate was decorated with 4 different signs of varying ages promising to kill anyone who entered, which, to me, seemed much less intimidating than a single sign would have. A baby tree, about as long as my forearm, had sprouted from a clogged rain gutter. Its seed must have been carried there by wind or a bird. I wondered how long it would take to grow to a size where it would tear the gutter clean off. Inside, a loud moving picture was showing on a spielie, and so we had to do a lot of hallooing and gate rattling before someone emerged. A woman of about 20. She'd have been a big girl to me when I'd been 8. I tried to remember the big girls' names. Leah? She moved away when those guys left, the woman explained, as if hooded men came to her door every day incanting the names of long-lost relations. She glanced back over her shoulder to watch a fiery explosion on the spielie. As the sound of explosion died away, we could hear a man's voice demanding something. She explained to him what she was doing. He didn't quite follow her explanation, so she repeated the same words, more loudly. Hold on, I'm gonna take a sip of coconut water. Looney? The cool down might be up for Looney to wake up soon, to ask for a snack. Right, Looney? Oop. What was that? Right. Oh my god, at first I thought that was my book. It's from the ambient, library ambience. The book turning sound. Okay. I infer that some kind of factional schism has taken place within your family while you were gone, Jessry said. I wanted to slug him. But when I looked at his face, I saw he wasn't trying to be clever. The woman turned to look at us again. I was peering at her through an aperture between 2 signs that were threatening to kill me, and I wasn't certain that she could see my face. I used to be named Vit, I said. The boy who went to the clock. I remember you. How's it going? Fine. How are you? Keeping it casual. Your mama isn't here. She moved. Far away? She rolled her eyes, vexed that I had leaned on her to make such a judgment. Farther than you can probably walk. The man inside yelled again. She was obliged to turn her back on us again and summarize her activities. Apparently, she does not subscribe to the Dravicular iconography, Jessry said. How do you figure? She said you went to the clock, voluntarily, not that you were taken by or abducted by the Avowed. The woman turned to face us again. I had an older sib named Cord, I said. I nodded at the oldest of the broken fetches. Former owner of that. I helped put it there. The woman had complex opinions of Cord, which she let us know by causing several emotions to ripple across her face. She ended by exhaling sharply, dropping her shoulders, settling her chin, and putting on a smile that I guessed was meant to be obviously fake. Cord works all the time on stuff. What kind of stuff? This question was even more exasperating to her than my earlier far away. She looked pointedly at the moving picture. Where should I look? I tried. She shrugged. You passed it on the way, probably. And she mentioned a place that we had in fact passed shortly after leaving the Decade Gate. Then she took a step back inside, because the man in there was demanding an account of her recent doings. "Keep it casual," she said, and waved, and disappeared from our view. "Now I really want to meet Cord," Jessry said. "Me too. Let's get out of here," I said, and turned my back on the place, probably for the last time, as I didn't imagine I'd come back at next Apert. Perhaps when I was 78 years old, reforestation was a surprisingly quick process. What's a sib? Why do you use that word? In some families, it's not entirely clear how people are related. We walked faster and talked less, and got back across the bridge in very little time. Since the place where Cord worked was so close to the consent, we first went up into the Burger neighborhood and found Jessry's house. When we'd gone out the Decade Gate, Jessry had been quiet and distracted for a few minutes before he had gone on his rant. Now I had an upside, which was that he'd been expecting his family to be standing in front of the gate to meet him. So as we approached his old house, I actually felt more anxious than I had when approaching mine. A porter let us in at the front gate, and we kicked off our sandals so that the damp grass would clean and soothe our blasted feet. As we passed into the deep shade of the forested belt around the main residence, we threw back our hoods and slowed to enjoy the cool air. No one was home except for a female servant, whose flukish was difficult for us to make out. She seemed to expect us. She handed us a leaf, not from a leaf tree, such as we grew in the consent, but made by a machine. It seemed like an official document that had been stamped out on a press or generated by a syntactic device. At its head was yesterday's date, but it was actually a personal note written to Jessry by his mother, using a machine to generate the neat rows of letters. She had written it in Orth with only a few errors. She didn't understand how to use the subjunctive. It used terms with which we were not familiar, but the gist seemed to be that Jessry's father had been doing a lot of work, far away, for some entity that was difficult to explain. But from the part of the world it was in, we knew it had to be some organ of the secular power. Yesterday, she had with great reluctance and some tears gone to join him, because his career depended on her attending some kind of social event that was also difficult to explain. They had every intention of making it back before the banquet on 10th night, and they were bending every effort to round up Jessry's 3 old brothers and 2 older sisters as well. In the meantime, she had baked him some cookies, which we already knew since the female servant had brought them out to us. Jessry showed me around the house, which felt like a math, but with fewer people. There was even a fancy clock, which we spent a lot of time examining. We pulled down books from the shelves and got somewhat involved in them. Then the bells began to ring in the Bosnian cathedral across the street, followed by the chimes of the fancy clock, and we realized that we could read books any day and sheepishly reshelved them. After a while, we ended up on the veranda eating the rest of the cookies. We looked at the cathedral. Bosnian architecture was a cousin to Mathic, broad and rounded where ours was narrow and pointy. But this town was not nearly as important to the secular world as the consent of Sant Edhar was to the Mathic world. So the cathedral looked puny compared to the minster. "Do you feel happy yet?" Jessry joked, looking at the cookies. "It takes 2 weeks," I said. "That's why Apert is only 10 days long." We wandered out onto the lawn. Then we marched back out and headed down the hill. Cord worked in a compound where everything was made of metal, which marked it as an ancient place. Not quite as ancient as a place made of stone, but probably dating back to the middle of the Praxic Age, when steel had become cheap and heat engines had begun to move about on rails. It was situated 1/4 of a mile from the Century Gate on the end of a slip that had been dug from the river so that barges could penetrate into this neighborhood and connect to roads and rails. The property was a mess, but it drew a kind of majesty just from being huge and silent. It had been outlined by a fence twice my height, made from sheets of corrugated steel, anchored in earth or concrete, welded together and braced against wind by old, worn-out railroad rails, which seemed like overkill for a wind brace. In fact, it was such conspicuous overkill that Jessry and I interrupted each other, trying to be the first to point it out, and got into an argument about what it meant. Other parts of the perimeter were made of the steel boxes used later in the Praxic Age to enclose goods on ships and trains. Some of these were filled with dirt, others stuffed with scraps of metal so tangled and irregular that they looked organic. Some were organic, because they had been colonized by slashberry. There was a lot of green and growing matter around the edges of the compound, but the center was a corral of pounded earth. Hold on, I'm just checking how much is left. I feel like this is going to be a longer chapter because it is called Apert. I might have to split this into two, because this is indeed very long. Let's see. To 157. Oh my gosh. Wait, 157? Wait, when did this chapter start? Page 55? 57? This chapter is exactly 100 pages. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll read to the end of like the next break. Yeah, definitely need to split this one. Okay. I'll read to the next break and then that'll be it because I ain't doing no 100 pages today. Let's see. And Looney's cooldown's about to end. I wonder if anyone's read the summary. Conspicuous, blah, blah, blah. Center was corral of pounded earth. The main building was little more than a roof on stilts, straddling the last 200 feet of the canal. Its trusses were oversized to support a traveling crane with a great hook dangling from a rusty chain, each of whose links was as big as my head. Wait, I forgot. I want to take a sip of my coconut water. Oh, we lost more pages. I really need to glue them back better. Okay. Oh my gosh. Its trusses were oversized to support a traveling crane with a great hook dangling from a rusty chain, each of whose links were as big as my head. We had seen the structure from the minster, but never given much thought to it. Teed into its side was a high-roofed hall, enclosed by proper walls of brick below and corrugated steel above. Grafted to the side of that, down low, was a shelter module with all sorts of homey touches, such as a fake wood door and a farm-style weather vane that looked crazy here. We knocked, waited, then pushed our way in. We made lots of noise, just in case this was another one of those places where visitors were put to death, but no one was there. The module had been designed to serve as a home, but everything in it had been bent to serve the purposes of an office. So, for example, the shower stall was occupied by a tall cabinet where records were filed. A hole had been sawed into a wall so that little pipes could be routed to a hot beverage machine. A freestanding urinal had been planted in the bedroom. The only decoration, other than those crazy-looking rustic touches that had shipped from the module, was oddly shaped pieces of metal, parts from machines, I reckoned, some of which had been bent or snapped in traumatic events we could only imagine. A trail of oily boot prints led us to the back door. This opened straight into the cavernous hall. Both of us hunched our shoulders as we stepped over the threshold. We hesitated just inside. The place was too big to illuminate, so most of the light was natural, shining through translucent panels high up in the walls, each surrounded by a hazy nimbus. The walls and floors were dark with age, congealed smoke, and oil. More hooks and chains dangled from overhead beams. The light washing around these gave them a spindly, eroded look. The floor sprawled away into a haze and shadow. Widely spaced around it were crouching masses, some no bigger than a man, others the size of a library. Each was built around a hill of metal, from a distance smooth and rounded, from up close rough, which led me to guess that these had been made in the ancient process of excavating molds from sand and pouring in a lake of molten iron. Where it mattered, the rough iron had been cut away to leave planes, holes, and right angles of bare gray metal, stubby feet by which the castings were bolted to the floor, or long V-shaped ways on which other castings could slide, driven by great screws. Huddled beside these things, or crouching under them, were architectures of wound copper wire, rife with symmetries, and when they moved, brilliant with azure-tinged lightning. Tendrils of wire and of artfully bent tubing had grown over these machines like ivy exploring a boulder, and my eye followed them to concentrations where I was sometimes surprised to see a human being in a dark coverall. Sometimes these humans were doing something identifiable as work, but more often they were just thinking. The machines emitted noise from time to time, but for the most part it was quiet, pervaded by a low hum that came from warm, resonating boxes strewn all round and fed by, or feeding, cables as thick as my ankle. He loves comparing thickness to his body parts. What was it? The wheel shafts as big as his thigh, and now the cables as thick as his ankle. There were perhaps half a dozen humans in the entire place, but something in their posture made us not dare approach them. One came our way, pushing a rusty cart exploding with wild helices of shaved metal. "Excuse me," I said. "Is Cord here?" The man turned and extended his hand toward something big and complicated that stood in the middle of the hall. Above it, the rational, a draconic geometry of the roof trusses and the infinitely more complex manifolds of swirling mist were magnified and made more than real by the sputtering blue light of electrical fire. If I saw a star of that color through a telescope, I would know it was a blue dwarf, and I could guess its temperature far hotter than our sun, hot enough that much of its energy was radiated as ultraviolet light and X-rays. But, paradoxically, the house-sized complex that was the source of the energy looked orange-red, with only a fringe of the killing radiance leaking out round edges or bouncing from slick places on the floor. As Jessry and I drew closer, we perceived it as a giant cube of red amber with two black forms trapped in it. Not insects, but humans. The humans shifted position from time to time, their silhouettes rippling and twisting. We saw that this machine had been robed in a curtain of some red jelly-like matter suspended from an overhead track. The blue light could blast straight up and kill germs in the rafters, but it could not range across the floor and blind people. Obviously, to me and Jessry, the curtain was red because it had been formulated to let only low-energy light, which our eye saw as red, pass through it. Hold on a sec. Oh! To high-energy light, which we saw as blue, if we could see it at all, it was as opaque as a steel plate. We walked around the perimeter, which was about the size of 2 small shelter modules parked side by side. Through the red jelly wall, it was difficult to resolve fine details of the machine, but it seemed to have a slab-like table, big enough to sleep 10, that eased to and fro like a block of ice on a griddle. Planted in its center was a smaller, circular table that made quick but measured spins and tilts. Suspended above all of this, from a cast iron bridge, was a mighty construct that moved up and down, and that carried the spark gap where the light was born. Banana, hello, how are you? An arm of tubular steel was thrust forth from the apex of the bridge toward a platform where the 2 humans stood. Pendant from its end was a box folded together from sheet metal, which looked out of place. It was of a different order of things from the sand-cast iron. Glowing numbers were all over it. It must be full of syntactic processors that measured what the machine was doing, or controlled it. Or both, for a true syntactic processor would have the power to make decisions based on measurements. Of course, my thought was to turn away and get out of the room. But Jeffrey was rapt. "It's okay. It's Apert," he said, and grabbed my arm and to turn me around. One of the 2 humans inside said something about the x-axis. Jeffrey and I looked at each other in astonishment. Just to be sure we'd actually heard such a thing. It was like hearing a fry cook speak Middle-earth. Other fragments came through the sputtering of the machine. Cubic spline, evolute, pylanic interpolation. We could not keep our eyes off the banks of red numbers on the front of the syntactic processor. They were always changing. One was a clock counting down in hundredths of a second. Others, as we gradually perceived, reflected the position of the table. They were literal transcriptions of the great table's X's and Y position. Table's X and Y position, the angles of rotation and tilt of the smaller table in the middle, and the altitude of the sizzling blaster. Sometimes all would freeze except for one. This signaled a simple linear move. Other times, they would all change at once, realizing a system of parametric equations. Jeffrey and I watched it for half an hour without speaking another word. Mostly, I was trying to make sense of how the numbers changed. But also, I was thinking of how this place was similar in many aspects to the Minster, with its sacred clock in the center, in its well of light. Then the clock struck, as it were. The countdown stopped at 0, and the light went out. Cord reached up and threw back the curtain. She peeled off a pair of black goggles and raised one arm to wipe her brow on her sleeve. The man standing next to her, who I gathered was the customer, was dressed in loose black trousers and a black long-sleeved pullover, with a black skull cap on his head. Jeffrey and I realized at the same moment what he was. We were dumbstruck. Likewise, the Ida saw what we were, and took half a step back. His long black beard avalanched down his chest as his mouth fell open. But then he did something remarkable, which was that he mastered the reflex to cringe and scuttle away from us, which had been drilled into him since birth. He thought better of that half-step back. He resumed his former stance, and, hard to believe, but Jeffrey and I agreed on this later, glared at us. Not knowing how to handle this, Jeffrey and I backed away and stood out of earshot while Cord did one small, quick, necessary chore after another, celebrating some art of shutting down the machine and making it ready for reuse. The Ida peeled off his skull cap, which was how they covered their heads when they were among their own kind, and drew it out into the slightly mushroomed stovepipe that they wore. Slightly mushroomed stovepipe that they wore when they were out and about so that we could identify them from a distance. He then set this back on his head while sending another defiant look our way. Just as we would never let the Ida come into the chancel, he saw it as sacrilege that we would come here, as if we were guilty of a profanation. Perhaps obeying a similar impulse, Jeffrey and I hooded ourselves. It was almost as if, Far from chafing under the stereotype of the sneaky, scheming, villainous Ida, this one was embracing it, taking pride in it, and pushing it as far as he could without actually talking to us. As we waited for Cord and the Ida to conclude their business, I kept thinking of all the ways that this place was similar to the Minster. For example, how I had been taken aback when I stepped into the hall, so dark and so light at the same time. A voice in my head, the voice of a Procyon pedant, admonished me that this was a Helicarnian way of thinking. For, in truth, I was looking at a collection of ancient machines that had no meaning, all syntax, no semantics. I was claiming I saw a meaning in it, but this meaning had no reality outside of my mind. I had brought it into the hall with me, carrying it in my head, and now I was playing games with semantics by pasting it onto these iron monuments. But the longer I thought about it, the more certain I became that I was having a legitimate upsight. I might just end it here. This is like almost to the halfway point of this chapter. I want to look up later or after the stream what the Ida are again to clarify. Oh, wait. Did she jump down? Loony? Loony? Did she jump down? That scared me. And right on the dot, Loony's cooldown has expired too. Loony, come here. Loony, look, she's awake. Oh, licks. Licks galore. She's like a doggy. Yeah, Luna marks the end of the stream. Did she jump off? I didn't see. I just heard a big thud suddenly on the floor. Oh, Luna. She's like, time's up. All right. Let's see. Can raid Wrist since he graced us with his presence on my stream and graced us with his number poem. What was that? What the heck? I need to like, should we copy and paste that? Or chapter 2. I don't even know. Should we just copy and paste what he said? Look at his stream title. Let's see. Will's burger. What the heck? Oh my gosh. He's asking for it. The burger. Should we just spam burgers? Or should we write something ridiculous? One burger. You know, I can't do it like he did. Like, what did he write? Here, I have a copy paste. What? No, I can't do it. Wait. He said BRB. Should I wait for him to be back? I mean, he'll see. He'll see the burger emotes, right? Okay. Well, thank you for watching, everyone. And I hope it was relaxing a little bit. Or if not relaxing, at least you enjoyed Loony sleeping. That's okay. Oh, Loony, sorry. I'm gonna give her dinner after I end stream and we raid Wrist. Yeah, you could wish Wrist good luck in his games. League of Legends and spam burgers in honor of ANATHEM, which loves its burgers. And I'll probably stream again later this week, so I will catch you guys. Thank you so much for everyone who lurked and followed. Oh, sorry, I missed this follow, but Mohammed Tariq, thank you for the follow if you're still here. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. And yeah. Oh, we gotta spam these burgers, okay? Burger time. All right, bye.